Yo, what's going on, guys? Crispy Flakes here. Welcome to Extra Crispy. So the other day, we reacted to Austin Sweat's worst endings to NBA careers. Today, we are checking out the non-best endings to NBA careers. And I will say, there's like one moment that comes to my mind. It's not even NBA related, but it's just like when I think of like the perfect ending to a career, I think of Rashard Lewis, man, of the Baltimore Ravens, bro. Like literally this man just like won a Super Bowl, one of the greatest players of all time. And he was like, I'm out, man. So yes. Absolutely love that. So let's go ahead, check this out, and see what it's all about.
Best. Certain players got real lucky to close out their careers, while others had the skill to force themselves onto a list like this. Guys that were so good, they
some dudes just like disappear.
Ended. And Bill Russell is the perfect example, because in his last ever NBA game, he put up 6 points and 21 rebounds in a win. Yeah, not so impressive.
Andre Drummond vibe.
The fact that it was also Game 7 of the 1969 NBA Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers. But what if I also included the fact that he was also the team's head coach that night? And that night, not only did he have his last night as a player, but he also won his record 11th NBA championship with the Boston Celtics. There is literally no better way.
If you're still watching this video, which you should be, it's only a minute in, hit that like button, man, and subscribe to the channel. Love to have you. Okay.
That to end your NBA career. And I don't know if that would earn him 2
would love to
rings,
have
one
you.
as a coach and one as a player, but I'm just mostly shocked that it was allowed and possible to happen. But it's just hard for a player to walk away on top, because there's always that question for them on if they could have done it again the next year. And they never get to know truly at what age they couldn't go anymore. But obviously, I
respect not figuring that out, though, to be honest.
On top, because by that point,
man had 17,000 rings.
Probably pretty bored of it, and then there's obviously nothing left to prove.
He called the start.
At the time when league was
man, Bill Russell had to start piercing other parts of his body and put them rings on, man. Oh. Pause. Okay, but yeah,
kind of getting started. He was by far the most dominant player.
Can you imagine though? I'm sorry. Can you imagine though? Just like, imagine you just like Bill Russell's wife, and you guys are just chilling at this nice ass beach. This man takes his shirt off, and he got some piercings, bro, and we got some. I don't know.
Still is in terms of winning, and probably always will be. But like I said, we have some other guys that make a case for the best ending to a career that are just luck, and Steve Kerr might be one of them. You see, Steve had a historic career.
Kerr the Blur.
Nobody called him that. He was one of the best shooters the game has ever seen, shooting over 50% from three times in his career. And he was just lucky enough to find himself on the Bulls just in time for their second.
Man, he got such a pretty form.
He won 3 titles with them. Got traded to the Spurs in 1998, and then won a title with them that year. So Steve Kerr four-peated. But then in 2001, he got traded away to the Portland Trailblazers. Well, 1 year later, the Spurs traded.
Bro, why it look like he got the same damn head now?
Time for him
well,
to
I guess he does.
The 2003 championship team in what was his last season. So just by a little bit of luck that they traded back for him, he was able to capture his fifth title during the last year of his career. I mean, any bench player that's able to find themselves on that many winning teams has to have a good amount of luck.
Was that Boban?
But Steve was just always in the right place. I just saw Boban. And speaking of the Spurs, David Robinson also comes to mind in terms of best NBA career endings, because winning that 2003 NBA championship also happened to be David's last game as well. In it, he played a little bit bigger of a role, putting up 13 points and 17 rebounds.
Yeah, then it was Tim Duncan's time.
NBA champion is the best way a player can do it. And it's strange because even for his greatest...
Honestly, like the closest thing we have to this, it sounds like would probably be like Dirk and Luka, right? Like, imagine going from David Robinson to Tim Duncan, and you get to go from Dirk to Luka.
Robinson was, as one of the most dominant centers of all time, both of his championships
were
won with
Jackson
major thanks to Tim Duncan. Tim led the way during their first title in 1999, and he was the guy on their team in 2003 when David wasn't playing like he used to anymore. But there's no doubt that Duncan couldn't have also done it alone either, because he was still young and needed the older half of the Twin Towers to be the veteran in the locker room, to come up big in those late game moments, and to take a lot of pressure off of him. People don't really talk about Robinson enough. He was always one of the most well-rounded centers we've ever seen. He just never had that one real all-star teammate to take his team to the next level, but Tim Duncan was able to come in and change that and give him a great ending to his career. On the other hand, Ray Allen really made a name for himself late into his career and had about as big of an impact as you could right before
his athleticism extremely underrated.
He was an insanely talented player early in his career on the Bucks and the Sonics, and then he got to the Celtics, kind of took a back seat and won his first NBA title. Well, after 5 years of playing there, with many years of losing to the Miami Heat, he realized that that team wasn't going to win another one. So he jumped ship to the competition, and on the Heat, his career had a second resurgence. It was a huge deal that Ray Allen was joining the already stacked Miami team, but to then go and make one of the biggest shots in NBA history in your second to last year in the league is insane. That shot in Game 6 against the Spurs is the biggest shot and the biggest moment of his career, and had he not joined the Heat, it would have never happened. So he makes this list just for cementing such a big legacy so deep into his career. And it doesn't hurt to mention the fact that he also made the NBA Finals and played big minutes in his last season too, even though they lost to the Spurs. And speaking of LeBron James teammates, that brings us to James Jones, and for him, we're looking at things a little differently. James
Man,
Jones was a great
won
shooter,
so many
but for
rings.
his whole career, he was just a role player. He came off the bench every year he was in the league. You just gotta believe that the second half of his career brought him one of the most fortunate endings possible, though, given the fact that just thanks to LeBron James, this man won 3 NBA championships.
No.
He got to Miami in
Thanks to James Jones, LeBron James won championship.
2008, so he was already there when LeBron
That's basically
arrived
out for
and
3 right there.
instantly won his
Bang,
first
man.
2 with him. Then when LeBron left to Cleveland in 2013, James Jones followed and was a part of their title. So he really got
LeBron
3
James
titles
followed
on the
James
back of
Jones.
LeBron. And had LBJ never chose Miami, the second half of James Jones' career wouldn't have gone nearly as good as it did. Now, we also had Kobe Bryant in the video for worst ending to an NBA career in the long run. The last few years of his career after that Achilles tear, we can all agree were
that final game, though.
rough. But in the short term of things, well, Kobe Bryant went out there and had the best last game we've ever seen, at least statistically. Okay, at least in terms of points. Not only did he finish off with 60 points, like who even does that? Kevin Durant's never even had a 60-point game in his career, and Kobe got one in his very last game at 37 years old. But not only did he finish with 60, but he brought his team back from behind, hit multiple clutch shots, and won it.
Yeah, they won the game too. That is the impressive part of that.
Every NBA
like, he
fan
still
was
managed the
paying
W.
attention to. And those last few minutes of the game were a real work of art and were a perfect explanation of who Kobe Bryant was. He didn't have the championship run in his last season like some of these other guys, but personally in his very last game in the league, he made sure people remembered his name. And sure, if you actually watched the game, those 60 points might not be as impressive as they were on paper, but hey, 60 points is still 60 points. And it was huge.
I still think it was magical, all things considered.
A lot of guys' careers end because of an injury or with them not being able to put up 20 points in a game no matter how many times they shot. A lot of guys don't have that ability. Kobe was always gonna, though. The skill was always gonna be there, but his body just couldn't keep up. But same for Michael Jordan too. He was also in my video for worst ending to a career. With his run on the Wizards and Jerry Krause breaking up the Chicago Bulls early, it made for an ending that wasn't so satisfying. But if instead you just look back at that last shot against the Jazz as the unofficial but true ending of his career, it's one of the all-time best. Because I mean, at the time, Jordan knew that would probably be his last season based on what he was hearing and where the team was headed. He knew that Game 6 at Utah with the championship on the line could be his last ever game, and he was still able to steal the ball and hit the jump shot to win it all. And what was one of the
I think I would have been disappointed though if he would have retired for good,
just the
you
fact
know?
that an ending to a career like that with a steal, an ankle-breaking crossover, then a jump shot showed why he was the true GOAT. And yeah, he should have just left it at that and never came back with Washington, but of course, Jordan being who he was just too competitive to stay away. In a lot
I like
of ways,
the Washington
MJ had a
days.
storybook career. It had its ups
I like
and
the
its
Washington
downs, but
days.
overall was dominated by success, and the way he went out for Chicago was the perfect final chapter.
Dirk! Oh. Alright. Dirk Nowitzki.
But what really sets him apart was the fact that in his very last game, he was able to put up 20 points and 7 rebounds.
Dirk
and get a long-standing
Nowitzki!
ovation as he checked out of the game for the final time. But the thing was that night he was playing against the Spurs.
Yeah, he had
in
me
San
tearing
Antonio,
up.
And for him to get that type of reaction from the opposing team's crowd, it really
My favorite moment from Dirk's final season was definitely the All-Star game where he nailed 2 or 3 threes. I loved every moment of that. I was just like, man.
goes to show
what
how
a legend.
big an
What a
impact
legend.
he actually made on the league. Then finally we have Clyde Drexler, and Clyde is one of the most underrated players in the history of the game. As a shooting guard, he had it all. He had everything you'd look for. Clyde was basically the light version of Michael Jordan. But that's the problem. He was the light version of him and always stuck in his shadow. He was a great player in Portland for years, but could never really get any major success with.
Well, also too, when it comes down to Clyde, I think a big thing about it is that since then we've had some pretty big guards, over on the Portland Trailblazers in the sense of Brandon Roy, Damian Lillard. So yeah, when you consistently have guys like that on the team, it does make you kind of forget about some of the great dudes that was there before.
With the team. So in 1995, he got traded to the Houston Rockets and couldn't have gotten any luckier because MJ had just retired and Houston had just won the 1994 championship. They were reigning champs and looking great halfway through the next season. So he instantly helps them out and eventually helps Hakeem Olajuwon win their second straight title. Then of course Jordan comes back and Houston doesn't win another championship. And even though this wasn't Clyde's final season,
that's all right, guys. Ring.
Towards the end of his career, and I don't think Clyde could be any happier around these circumstances. He wanted off of his team who was no longer in playoff contention and just so happened to get traded to the eventual NBA champions. He was so close to being one of the best players to
2K,
never
man.
win a ring,
Dropped
but a
50
little luck
with
got him
Clyde.
right out of that. Now, I know there's probably some guys that I might have missed, but I looked for a while and this was the best I came up with. If you have anyone better who had the best ending,
I would say overall that's good. I'm sure there's more out there. There definitely is, but no, I think this was a good list. Some of the greatest ones of all time. So that's all we got for this video, guys. Thank you all so much for watching, and peace out, my friends.